Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to another installment of Chuck's Captivating Chat, the edition for November 11th, 2024. Shall I just say it, even though it's cliche? Where has the year gone? How can it possibly be this late in the year? How can it be almost time for Thanksgiving? And of course, we're already being reminded. We usually are reminded in October now that Christmas is coming. I love Christmas time. It's just a little too soon. Hey, Ward, thank you for joining. I sent you an email, Ward. I'm sorry it took me until last night to write you back. Things have just been crazy, crazy busy for me. Um, I've been working on all my various responsibilities and assignments and consignments, and I still managed to make the time to do this once a week, to at least do my live stream every Monday. um, I was talking to my good friend Pam today on the phone in Canada, and I told her this actually relaxes me. Hope you can. Some ambulances going by outside. It relaxes me, um, calms me. It feels good to be with friends. Let's see, would you say, Ward? Yes, I know, Ward. I know there's a bad room elephant, but keep this place a refuge. Thank you, Ward. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have to say the obvious. It's been a rough week for a lot of us. I'm not trying to get political here, but I'm just acknowledging for about half this nation, it was a little traumatic and distressing. And the reason I know this, aside from a lot of obvious reasons, is my job. I work as Dr. Whimsy Anderson's assistant, and one of my duties is to make phone calls to her many, many clients just to check in, see how they're doing, because Whimsy loves that personal touch. And honestly, I love it myself. And so I've had a chance to just have people open up and share their feelings and their distress. And some have used words like trauma, fear, sorrow, disappointment. But we're going to heal. We're going to move onward. I certainly don't plan to talk about politics much more on this show. As I found out, I had, a few responses that weren't the greatest, but to most of you were very, very lovely and supportive. I'm going to leave the politics for the show I do with Whimsy on Tuesdays. That's one of my other duties, is to do her live stream, uh, Taco Tuesdays, same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, on the Oracle of Whimsy channel. And we get into a lot of heavy, heavy politics, just current events, but that's the appropriate place for it. I think this channel should get back to the basics of what I've always intended for it to just be, about old Hollywood, show business stories, my experiences here in Los Angeles, sharing the massive research that I did on Lucille Ball. So I can tell you all kinds of I Love Lucy stories. Um, yeah, yeah, Ward, you're right. We must keep in mind that the Israelites survived the 300-year Babylonian captivity. Uh, I, I hope it's I want so much to be optimistic. I so want to believe we're going to pull through this. It's going to be okay. I mean, it clearly was the mandate of the majority. This is what the American people voted for. I'm going to do my heartfelt best to go forward. But I think it's also a time, as I had in a conversation yesterday with one of Whimsy's clients on the phone, um, for at least the next 2 years. We can't really do much right now other than accept it, but it's a time to band together. It's a time to enjoy art and music, literature, culture, togetherness, whatever, whatever makes us happy, whatever gives us fulfillment, whatever helps us to get in touch with the love that we have within ourselves and for ourselves. There might be a hidden blessing in all of this. So, let's see, what was that word? Let's also keep in mind that after Lucy and Desi's divorce, so lots of people thought both of their careers were doomed, but history proved that they still had triumphs ahead. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, getting to that, I think Desi Arnaz, I know at the time of their divorce, his intention was to largely step aside from show business and just focus on running their Desi Lou studio, which was quite an empire at the time. 1959, the year before their divorce, Desi Lou Studios was actually bigger than MGM, Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers. People forget this. Desi Lou Studios for a period was the most powerful studio in Hollywood, making Desi Arnaz the most powerful man for a brief time. But at the time of the divorce, he and Lucy were both quite traumatized, both by their own admissions. Uh, They very much loved each other, but they very much could not live together anymore either. It was, I think we all have had situations like that, and both of them became seriously ill. Lucy, she went to New York to pursue a Broadway musical, Wildcat. That had always been her dream to star in a Broadway musical, but 8 shows a week, combined with all of the emotional stress she was going through, severely affected her health. She contracted pneumonia. She lost a lot of weight. She could have died. Desi Arnaz developed severe diverticulitis, had to have a temporary colostomy, and he was near death for a while. So the emotional impact of that divorce affected them horribly, but they even held out on the hope that they might get back together for a while. They did talk about it even after the divorce, but, um, we know what happened. We know what happened, and they both remarried. Desi finally decided he even wanted out of heading Desi Lou Studios. He just wanted out altogether. He couldn't take it anymore, and he approached Lucy and said, "Would you like to buy me out?" And Lucy had a lot of reluctance about this because she had never aspired to be a studio head, but she saw what was happening to Desi. She still cared deeply for him, and she did buy him out, and she took over the running of the studio. I'm just starting to look at comments here while I'm talking at the same time. Um, yeah, yeah, that's so true about Busby Berkeley making movies for depression folks to be able to imagine they were living the glamorous life. Oh, yeah, that was the big secret behind many of those Hollywood screwball comedies, the musicals. Um, it was this imaginary world where people were dressed in tuxedos and women had high couture evening gowns, and they always had the most sparkling, witty dialogue and beautiful Art Deco sets, and it seemed like everyone was wealthy. And there were even little things like they would get in a car, the car wouldn't even need a key to start, and no one even needed to go to the bathroom. It was just this fantasy world where everything was idealistic, and depression era audiences loved that. It may sound cliche to say it now, but for 10 cents, people could go into a dark movie theater and look at this big screen with these large silvery images of these beautiful people who were almost like gods and goddesses, and they could forget their troubles. You may recall a movie Woody Allen made back in the 80s, The Purple Rose of Cairo, which was exactly that premise. Mia Farrow playing this, I believe she played a waitress, rundown little diner, very sad, grim little life in the 30s. But she'd go to the movies and lose herself into that world until one day she's at the movies and one of the actors in the movie breaks the fourth wall. This is on the filmed image on screen. He breaks the fourth wall and turns, you out there, you're here again to see me again." I'm paraphrasing this. I'd have to watch the movie again, but he walks out of the screen. And suddenly he's in color and he's for real, and oh, I don't wanna spoil the movie for you, but it's one of my very favorites. I need to find a way to read the comments and do this at the same time. I wish maybe there is such a thing, like a teleprompter where I can look into the camera, but I can see the words scrolling in front of me, and I can give the illusion of eye contact. I would love that. But let's see here. Um, yes, yes, Lord, that's right. Lucy did say she intended to go to Switzerland after Wildcat. Um, that was coming from a place in her life where she, like Desi, had just had it. She was burned out. She was tired of all the fame, that she had fought so hard to get. She saw it wasn't necessarily so great. She just wanted a private life. She just wanted to go away and heal, which is the way I think a lot of people in America are feeling right now. They just want time to heal and be quiet. So I can understand where that came from. But Switzerland was often looked upon as a refuge in those days. And of course, that's where Charlie Chaplin was in exile for 20 years after had a bad experience with Hadda Hopper, the gossip columnist, who basically called him a communist during the McCarthy era, and he was thrown out of the country. Anyway, let's see here. Yeah, no, Lucy was never a shy person to speak her mind. That's for sure. Um, yeah, we need to find positive escapes to recharge. Yeah, Purple Rosa Cairo was fantastic. Yes, you're right there, Ward. Lucy was very much a type A personality, and I agree. I think, it would have been a novelty for a while to have a chateau and the mountains of Switzerland in the snow, and I think after about 6 months of that, she would have been climbing the walls. Most people who know Lucy, who knew her, I should say, uh, said she was very much a workaholic. She was very much about work. Work was her first and foremost love. In fact, she did go through a lot of trauma by her own admission when her final series, and I realized Life with Lucy in the 80s was technically her last series, but I'm talking about her last successful long run series because Life with Lucy ended after 8 episodes. I know 13 were filmed, but only 8 aired before it was canceled. It was very humiliating and devastating for her. But Here's Lucy ended in 1974, and there are varying accounts of how that show ended. There's some versions that say that CBS officially canceled the show, but they were giving out of great respect to Lucy. They were letting her say that it was her own decision to formally end the show and she wanted to retire. And of course, there are other accounts where it was just that Lucy did want to end the show after all those years. She had been, after I Love Lucy, she took a break to do Wildcat. And then in 1962 came back to series television and was there until 1974. Um, she probably was tired at the moment. She needed a break, but she said in interviews that it proved to be traumatic because she was completely lost without her work. It was her arena and it was no longer there for her. Um, yeah, let's see what are some other comments here. Yeah, I was lucky Chaplin could afford Switzerland. Oh yeah, he was a wealthy man. He could afford it, but um it was difficult for an artist like Chaplin. It definitely curtailed how much he could continue to work. He did make movies in the subsequent years, but I think they were all done in the UK. I could be wrong on that. I think they were all produced in the UK. Yes, Here's Lucy sure did help Lucy Arnaz hone her talent. In fact, that was one of the reasons Lucille Ball did Here's Lucy. Um, it was to help her 2 children. get a big break in show business, and they were lucky kids because they had one of the best showcases any aspiring actor could ever hope to have. And then to be guided by the magnificent Lucille Ball, never mind she was their mother. I mean, just to co-star with her, you don't get a better master class than that. And some have been confused about, she did the Lucy show and then went into Here's Lucy. And a lot of people have never understood why. Why did she just abruptly change her format like that? And the reason was because in 1967, she sold Desi Lou Studios to Paramount. Desi Lou, of course, was the old RKO Studios, conveniently next door, side by side with Paramount. So it was a very easy thing for them to just tear down a barrier wall or two and just connect the studios. So she sold that to Paramount. But when she sold Desi Lou, she also sold all the rights to her own show, The Lucy Show. And Lucy wanted to own her shows. That was important to her. She wanted to have total control. So she knew the only way around this was to make a new show. The I mean, literally, the Lucy show went off the air 1 week later. This was, of course, during the summer break and reruns, but 1 week later, the new Here's Lucy premiered. Totally different format, but of course, it was Gail Gordon came back. Many of the regulars like Mary Jane Croft, Mary Wicks, a lot of the familiar people came back. And basically, we're playing the exact same characters, only with new names and maybe new professions. They did tweaking. Like it was still the dynamics of Lucy working as the secretary for Gail Gordon, only now they added the twist that they were relatives, that um, Lucy was once again playing a widow. And in this new version, Gail Gordon, instead of playing Mr. Mooney, I always loved him as Mr. Mooney, his little bow tie. Theodore J. Mooney, the banker, but he was now Uncle Harry, meaning uncle to her two children. He was her brother-in-law. He was the brother of her late husband, and he obviously felt duty bound to give his late brother's wife employment. Much to his usual chagrin and annoyance, he never could really fire her for those reasons. So they had that new premise, and that was the reason for it. And Lucy also always took great security in having her loved ones and her family with her on stage. That was one of the great secrets of I Love Lucy, having Desi literally at her side on camera, right with her on stage. Desi made Lucy feel safe, protected. She knew she could take risks with her comedy. She could do big, outrageous things because Desi was always there to catch her. Much like that story I told of how when she was a very little girl, her father used to throw her high up in the air and catch her and throw her up in the air and catch her. And Lucy said in her autobiography, she was never fearful. She always knew her father was gonna catch her, and I've always felt she always knew Desi was gonna catch her. So I think she very much missed those dynamics, and there was something in her that loved the idea of having her 2 real life children at her side, on camera, on the show, exactly as Desi had been for her. Let's see, I better check some comments here, let's see. Yes. Oh, that's true. Mary Jane did play Mary Jane Lewis. And, one of the reasons for that was Lewis was Mary Jane's married name. That was her married name, Lewis. So they incorporated that into the show. Uh, yes, that's a good point. Could anybody have imagined Mr. Littlefield being Kim and Craig's paternal uncle? Oh, I loved Gail Gordon as Mr. Littlefield. Oh, I just keep thinking one of my very, very favorite episodes, the one where Ricky was trying to get a promotion And Mr. Littlefield, of course, ran the Tropicana nightclub, and he happened to be a stickler about punctuality. And Lucy was always late for everything, so she had played a little trick on herself by, setting the clock ahead, and it turned, or was it back? I forget, but anyway, Lucy and Ricky were atrociously late showing up for the dinner, and and Lucy and Ricky, they're just starving hungry, and they have to hide this, and Lucy says, "Oh, I hope we didn't spoil your dinner by being so late," and Mr. Littlefield just goes, "No, not at all. It was delicious." When he said that, we had stuffed pork chops this thick. I so love it when Mrs. Littlefield comes in and goes, "Oh, perhaps you'd like an after dinner mint. There's nothing like a good after dinner mint." And she comes in with a little candy dish, and Lucy grabs the whole bowl and stuffs it down her throat. And then Lucy notices the fruit in a bowl on the table. And before they arrived in the scene, because that show was so beautifully crafted, they set the joke up so well. A casual little mention about this tacky wax fruit that Mr. Littlefield could not stand, but Mrs. Littlefield insisted upon because it had been a wedding gift from her parents. So we know that wonderful scene where Lucy is so hungry and she's trying so hard to hide it. This is actually, she's just done a whole mouthful of mince. She reaches over, just ever so slightly grabs the apple, bites it, and it's stuck in her mouth. Remember that? Having to pry her mouth open to get the apple out. That is so hysterically funny. Um, but it was just the way it was all set up, the way it was rehearsed, the way it was planned, and that actually segues into something I was gonna address on the show later today because, t yesterday on Facebook, I saw, because I subscribe to a lot of the I Love Lucy things, somebody posted a piece where they showed that clip of Lucy getting the wax apple stuck in her mouth, but the narrator was saying something about how it was an accident, it was unintentional. Lucy bit into a piece of fruit, not realize, meaning Lucille Ball, not Lucy, bit into the apple, not realizing it was fake. It was stuck in her mouth, and she had to ad lib around it. And I wanted to go, "Bullshit, no! No, that is not how it happened." I know this just from my own research. In fact, anybody can look this up. That show was meticulously rehearsed to the very last little detail. They never, almost never ad lib. Maybe if a rare line got flubbed, they worked around it quickly or something, but no, nothing was left to chance. Nothing was ad libbed, especially a polished piece of comedy like that. That well timed, that did not just happen by accident. Lucy accidentally biting into an apple, not realizing. No, no, no. And I wondered, I was so frustrated when I saw that post, and someone in the comments was mentioning that with the proliferation of AI, more and more posts like this are getting posted where people will just take the video and have AI create dialogue to match it. And apparently that's what this person did. They just had artificial intelligence say Lucy had accidentally bitten into the fruit or something, and they were implying it wasn't supposed to happen. But that actually worries me a lot because I'm really coming to dislike artificial intelligence. I mean, I know we have to live with it. We have to accept it, much like some other things we're going to have to accept the next few years, whether we like it or not. But AI is proliferating a lot of false information like that, and even doctoring up photographs, recreating photos, making moments that never even happened. And there's going to come a time where people are not going to even realize this anymore, and it's going to get accepted as fact. Now, maybe I shouldn't care so much about that, but I do. That's the perfectionist in me. That's the part of me that loves truth, the part of me that loves authentic historical facts and feels it's very important that that information get passed correctly from each generation to another. Let's see. Oh yeah, Lord, you said Lucy did not accidentally light her nose on fire. Oh my gosh, no, not in the least. I'm sure you know the story. That was the genius of makeup artist Hal King. You know, when the scripts would come out, lots of times other people besides the actors would have to look at the script, the makeup artist. Sometimes it was Irma Cusley, the hairdresser. Sometimes it was a Lois Jensen or Edward Stevenson, the costume designers, because there would be things in there that would require their unique services, and they were going to need time to solve the problems. To how do you do this? Like that in itself, that was in the script about Lucy setting her nose on fire. Well, it was up to Hal King. He had to work out the logistics of how that was going to be done, and in a way that was going to be 100% safe for Lucy. And he brilliantly, because the nose was putty, as we know. They made a whole routine about that in the show. The California sun sure makes your skin soft. She kept remolding her nose. But he ingeniously put a candle wick inside the putty of the nose, and of course pre-tested this. Probably I should have asked Madeline Davis this when I got to spend time with her, because she did answer a lot of my questions about how things were done on the show. I wish I'd thought to ask her this, because Madeline Davis, as the one female writer on the show, they would use her to test out the stunts to make sure that Lucy would not be harmed physically in any way, shape, or form. I guess they figured Madeline was more expendable if something happened. But she had to do things like be rolled up in a rug, hang from a rope, have icicles applied to her. Um, I asked her about that episode where Lucy had the honey and eggs and water dumped over her head. I said, "Oh, Madeline, did you have to go through that?" And she said, "Oh, thank goodness, no. No, that they did not make me do." But I am wondering if Madeline was the one they had to test the putty nose out on with the wick to make sure her face wouldn't go up in flames. I wish I could have asked her that. Um, what is that? I think Miss Davis did state how the nose candle worked, but I'm wondering if Miss Davis had to be the one who tested it. I know they had to test it out on someone, and often it fell to her. But yeah, that was ingenious. I'm just looking at some comments here. Um, older I get, the more it's very rare and precious a commodity common sense truly is. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Lucy hated being in that rug due to claustrophobia. That is very true. Lucy was severely claustrophobic. You may recall the episode where she had to be locked inside of a trunk. And Lucy admitted in later years, she said, that was one of the very few times on the show I ever felt like she didn't do it, but she said, I felt so compelled to call cut. Let me out of this thing. I can't stand it anymore. She suffered in that trunk. She was having panic attacks in there, but Lucy was very much the trooper, the veteran, whatever it takes, the show goes on type of person. And also, it was her show, it was her money. Stopping a take like that and starting over again prolonged the production, having to reset up everything and all, and that cost money. So that is what prevailed. But when you watch episodes like that, I mean, for myself, it's a little hard knowing that she was in such distress during that. And also that episode, where she misses her ship to Europe. The ship takes off without her, and she has to board a helicopter. and be taken out to sea and lowered down. Now, obviously, they did not take Lucy out to sea with a helicopter and lower her down on a rope. But what they did have to do, and I've seen the photographs to verify this, they had her in the soundstage and from the studio audience 30 feet up, hanging by a rope that had to be lowered down. And Lucy admitted she had a terrible fear of heights also. She said that was horrifying for her. It was so hard, but again, you watch the episode, you don't see a trace of it. She was such a pro. But think about that also, poor woman, 30 feet up being lowered down. I'm trying to think of some other examples that were hard for her. Maybe they'll come to me during the show, or Ward, maybe you'll have an idea of something. Um, yeah, Lucy was totally, totally dedicated. Lucy was so tough about that sort of thing. She had a reputation for being really hard on people, really hard to where some claim she was abusive, called her a bitch, impossible, maniacal, but Lucy never pushed anybody in a way that she did not push herself first and foremost. She was a driven perfectionist, and she knew that everybody besides herself had to look good also. So she would push people, like even a person who had one line, she'd make the person say that line over and over until it was right, or she'd find a replacement. She was so she had blinders on in that respect. When she was working, she was so laser focused, whatever it takes to get the results. And if it meant rolling over people like a steamroller, being a bitch, kicking somebody in the shins because they weren't on their mark, she'd do it. And of course, sometimes face consequences afterwards. Um, the actress, the episode where Lucy Ricardo got a maid after she had her baby, and then she decided having a maid wasn't right for her. It was Mrs. Porter, the maid. And why am I blanking on the name of the actress? And I know it quite well, but I found out in my research, she filed a complaint with the Screen Actors Guild against Lucy for abusing her on the set. And the story was squelched. It was kept out of the press. I don't know what they did, if they had to pay her off or make concessions, but that did happen. Um, when I was researching my book, I was lucky to speak to many people who worked on the show or worked on her subsequent series. Uh, I was working on this in the late 90s, early 2000s, and of course, many of these people were still very much alive. And I one of the greatest experiences of my life was gathering those stories and meeting these people and hearing it all firsthand. But I was always mystified. Well, yes, it was Verna Felton. Thank you very much. Thank you. I knew the name and I couldn't think of it. Thank you. That's one of the things about doing a live show like this. Sometimes I'm like, deer in the headlights. Oh, shoot. I can't remember this. I should know this. But yeah, it was, I kept getting different, two distinct factions, much like God, why am I said I wasn't gonna get back to politics, but it's much like this country is very divided right now. But I found that the Lucy people were divided. I had a segment of people, "Oh, she was a C word. She was a bitch. She was impossible. Oh, monster. Oh, God, horrible person. I go, oh, she was horrible to everybody." But that side. And then I'd get just as many people, and I'm talking about people who worked with her, who knew her well, said she was wonderful, she was loving, she was nurturing, caring. More than one person said to me, Lucille Ball was the best employer I ever had in my entire career. She really took you under her wing and treated you like you were her family. There was a story once she was working very late, um, and she was driving out of the studio, and Lucy knew everybody by first name. So the security guard was in the booth. "Oh, Miss Ball, have a good night," and I forget what his name was, but she thanked him, and then she saw he was shivering. It was cold at night. She turned her car around, went back into one of the sound stages because she was so smart. She knew where everything was, in all the departments. She knew the inventory of everything in that studio. She went in the right building, got a nice blanket, and then drove out and gave it to him in the booth and said, "Here, you put this around you right now and you take care of yourself." That's who Lucy was. So she was a complicated woman. She was very driven. She was very focused about her work. I understand this as an artist myself. I get when I am painting, I'm drawing, I'm writing, I can be very myopic, blinders on, whatever it takes to get the results, to get the finished product, whatever. And sometimes people have accused me of not being so nice during times like that. But I think that's where it came from. It was Lucy, the perfectionist, who just cared so deeply about results. And keep in mind, this was also a woman who was heading a studio, starring in a television show, and she was also raising two teenage children. That's not, do I have to even say it? How complicated that would be to juggle all of that? So I can see where Lucy might fly off the have flown off the handle a little too easily, or her need for perfectionism spirit. I'm remembering. This is a story I've told before, but I think it does apply here as we're telling again. I had a very intuitive dream with Lucille Ball a number of years ago. It was when I was writing about her, and I was writing about her step grandmother Peterson. And the story had been that this was after Lucy's mother Dee Dee had remarried. She had to go away with her new husband to nearby Detroit. This is, of course, when they were all in Jamestown, New York. She had to go to Detroit to find work just to help support the family. So Lucy was maybe 8 years old or so at the time, and she was left with Dee Dee's husband's mother, Grandma Peterson, her step grandmother, a very stern, cold Swedish woman, very no nonsense. And she was a perfectionist, and she insisted that little Lucy do chores over and over and over repeatedly, like wash dishes 5 times until they were spotless and shining, sweep the floor over and over until it was perfect, things like that. And in my opinion, and I guess in my shallow-minded opinion, I thought that was abusive. I thought it was at least psychologically abusive, and so I was writing in terms of that, about how Lucy had been abused by her step grandmother over those ways, and my computer crashed. This was like the year 2001 or so, if you may remember. Computers back then did that a lot. Just crashed, and you'd lose every single thing that you'd worked on. In that case, I lost an entire evening's worth of writing. I mean, I was heartsick. Uh I thought, "Why did this happen? Why did this happen? I just lost all this work," and so I was very disappointed, I was disgruntled, and I went to bed, and I'm sure you've all had those dreams that are so vivid and so real, like somebody is there with you, and I'll never forget this dream, because this was one of those. It was Lucy, furious, and she had her eyes right up to my side. I still remember those blazing, angry blue eyes. And she said, "You look here. I did not like," she called me Buster. I remember that. "Look here, Buster. I did not like what you wrote about my grandmother Peterson. I didn't like that at all. I loved my grandmother Peterson. Let's get clear on that. And yes, she was tough on me. And yes, she made me do things over and over again, but that made she disciplined me, and that made me feel loved. I wanted someone to discipline me. I wanted someone to look over me and protect me, and I always took it that way, that I was being loved. And then, this is the intriguing thing in the dream, Lucy said, "Everybody said I was a bitch," when the truth is I loved them, and I was showing my love and my care for people. And I woke up from the dream and I was like, something so intense. I even remember still looking at the clock by my bedside. It was 3 a.m. I remember just waking up shaking. It was like a lightning bolt. And it was the next day I was in Old Town Pasadena because I used to like to go to the Huntington Gardens a lot. I need to get back in that habit again. Be good for my soul. But I was walking around in Old Town Pasadena, and I couldn't get that dream out of my mind. I mean, it really spooked me because it was so real. And but at the same time, I thought, is this my imagination? Was this just a weird dream or something? And then I said out loud, Lucy, if that was really you, what you said to me was really you, I want you to give me a sign right now. And I swear to God, this is true. I turned my head. And right in the store window was a big heart, I love Lucy pillow. Literally, the second I said that and I turned my head, I was like, okay, Lucy, you made your point. But the great thing about that was she gave me the key to understanding her personality. And she gave me the key to understanding why people were so divided in their opinions of her. Because I gotta tell you, there were more people telling me how lovely she was and gracious and caring and nurturing, and that rings true with me. That was the true Lucy. I think it was the people who were not prepared. It was the people who came on the set, maybe not knowing their lines or maybe not knowing their blocking or hitting their marks or nonsense like that. Lucy had no patience for that type of thing, and she would react accordingly. So anyway, I should look at some of my comments here. Oh yeah, it was Grandma Peterson taught her how to crochet. Yeah, that is true. Now, why couldn't they take their fatherless grandchild? I don't know the story there. All I know is Dee Dee left little Lucy with Grandma Peterson for an extended period. I don't know what the length was. Lucy tended to embellish her stories. She was just a storyteller and she could be dramatic. And she tried to imply it was like years. And I think Dee Dee actually interjected and said, "It was 3 weeks, Lucy." Don't quote me on that. What happened with Lucy's paternal grandparents? Lucy's paternal grandparents? Well, that would have been, Grandpa Fred C. Hunt and Florabelle. Florabelle died of, I believe, uterine cancer early on, and I think it was in the 1920s when, Florabelle died, but Grandpa Hunt, ooh, that is a whole story there. I could do a 2-hour show on Grandpa Hunt. As you probably know, he was the one who persuaded Lucy to, register as a communist in 1936. He made the whole family register as communists at a time where it just frankly didn't matter. It didn't, and they were just doing it to humor him. Lucy was not political. She didn't, "Oh, here, just sign it." And then little did she know that when she was a superstar in Hollywood in the early '50s, during the height of the McCarthy era, it was nearly going to destroy her. But, yeah, Grandpa Hunt died in the '40s, and, I think it was the early '40s when Lucy was at MGM. I could be wrong on this. I think he died in 1944. I'd have to look that up, but, there was a touching story of how they knew he would have they were living obviously in California, and they knew their grandpa wanted to be buried next to his beloved Florabelle, and at tremendous expense, the Lucy had his body flown back to Jamestown so that he could indeed be buried with his beloved Floribel. Let's see, where's some other comments here? Oh, yes, Desi saw those intense blue eyes more than once. He even said that once on The Tonight Show. He mentioned her blazing blue eyes. Of course, he also mentioned when he first met her at RKO the very first day. And, oh, it's so sweet. There's an interview with Johnny Carson where Desi just says, "Oh, those big blue eyes." Oh, it was so sweet. Said she was wearing a beautiful yellow sweater. She had her then blonde hair pulled back, and he commented on her blue eyes. And I'm also thinking of that scene from I Love Lucy with the French Apache dancer. "I want to look into your big blue eyes." And she goes, "Ugh." Let's see where's some other comments here. Um, Oh, yeah, I that wouldn't surprise me that Lucy invited Mrs. Peterson to come live with her. She was like that. Lucy was very much about family. In fact, when, her very first home here in Hollywood, which still stands, still looks largely the same, and I have been inside that house on, Ogden Drive, technically in West Hollywood now. The reason Lucy and her brothers saved up their money to get that house, it was rented, was because their big dream was to bring the whole family out to Hollywood so they could all live together under one roof, to bring Mother Dee Dee, to bring Grandpa Hunt, to bring their Lucy's cousin Cleo, who was basically raised like Lucy's sister. And they all just lived in that house. And that was so important to Lucy because they had lost their home in 1927 when Grandpa Hunt was sued. He was the owner of the house and he was sued, and the family lost everything right down to every stick of furniture, and they were separated. And Lucy was determined that one day they were going to be back together again. Um, I've told that story on here before. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, Dee Dee always told it like it was. Fred and Flora Bell. Oh, that's right, that's right. Fred and Flora Bell were Lucy's maternal grandparents, Dee Dee's parents. Okay, I was confused on that. Her paternal. Okay, that's right, because, her father, um, very young man, he died at the age of 27, and, I've never seen mention of his parents. That's something I'd like to research. 'Cause, all and I trust me, I've read every biography in existence on Lucille Ball, including her autobiography, including Desi Arnaz's autobiography, and I can't recall any reference, any referral to them being present in her life, so I wonder what did happen to them. Um, yeah, um, the Ogden Drive current owners get overwhelmed. Well, now that I don't know. Because I was in the house about a decade ago, and the woman who owned the house at the time has subsequently sold the home, and, she wanted to move back east again. Um, Wonderful, wonderful lady. I don't wanna violate her privacy or anything, but she was so kind to me, and, it was a coworker of mine. I had expressed how much I'd always wanted to go into that house, and she said, "I know the person who lives there. I can set it up for you." So, and this was a big thing, just to to allow a stranger into her home like that, but she could not have been nicer to me. And she said she always tried to accommodate Lucille Ball fans. Whenever she'd get a request from someone wanting to see the home, she was very happy to share it. And she even said to me, if you just want to sit outside in the backyard and reflect on this, it's okay with me. Stay here as long as you want." She couldn't have been more generous with me, and she gave me the whole tour. The house has been remodeled quite a bit on the inside, as would be one would expect after about 90 years. Yes, that's right. It was 90 years ago they they took possession of the house. It was in 1934. There were a few elements that remained. Um, that beautiful old glass with the swirls in it, that looks like hand-blown glass. Um, in the living room around the doorway are all it's surrounded by these panes of glass, these little windows. And the time I was there, the sunlight was coming in through the windows, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is how it would have been if Lucy was sitting here in the living room with her own family." That sunlight coming in, because she told me those were the original plates of glass. They had always been there since the house was built, hence the swirls in the glass. And at the time, there was a big tree in the backyard, and that was a tree that Lucy wrote about. And Lucy said that she loved to sit under that tree and write in her diary. So I thought that was sweet that that was still there. And there was a whole patio, like a deck porch that had been built in subsequent years. And she told me that underneath that deck were like Grauman's Chinese theater blocks of cement. And Lucy had taken her dogs and cats and put their paw prints in the cement and written their names, just like Grauman's Chinese theater. And it was all still there underneath the deck. Um, was that inlay gla was it a sliding door? No, it was not a sliding door, it was just a traditional door, but there were little window panes around the door. I don't know how else to describe it. If I had a photograph here, I could show you. Um, but anyway, under the deck were the original concrete slabs. Now, I gotta tell you, if I had bought that house, I would have torn that deck down just to have it back the way it was when Lucy was there. Never mind how nice the patio deck was, but I I'm a stickler for authenticity. I would have liked to have had the little concrete slabs there. And also, the little freestanding garage was still there and looked just like it looked in the 1930s. And that's where Grandpa Hunt used to have his communist meetings. Mhm. He would host communist meetings in the garage in the back of the house, and, of course, all this came to light, uh, when Lucy was under investigation by the McCarthy era. It was all so bad. It came back to haunt Lucy in the worst way. At the time, it seemed innocent, but the garage is still there. And the woman, I guess I can give her first name, it was Ruth. Ruth told me that when she went in the very back of the garage, she found a wooden box, like a wooden crate, like a thing you'd put Coke bottles in or something, and carved into it with a penknife was Lucy. It was Lucy had carved her name into that, and it was still there, buried in the back of the garage. And I asked her, "What happened to it? What happened to it? Do you have it? Do you have it?" And she said, "Oh, no, I gave it to my grandson." Oh, I like to have seen that. In fact, I'd like to, "Oh, please, 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 could I have it? Could I have it?" You know? No, I don't think it started out as a stable because it was very tiny. I don't know. I don't think it would have been big enough for even one horse. But I realize that. I realize a lot of those little houses, I think they called them carriage houses, I believe, and they were used as staples back in the horse and buggy days. But that house was built, I think, in the 1920s, which would have been well into the era of the automobile. So probably not then. Um, well, you know what? According to Ruth, it was Lucy. Lucy was carved into the box. Now, Desi likes to claim that he was the first one to call her Lucy. That's a very romantic story. There might be a little truth to that, but I know for fact people were calling her Lucy uh, back when she was even a teenager. There are plenty of handwritten letters, things like that, that bear out she was Lucy. So I don't know where Desi got that notion he was the first one to call her that. Um, but it's sweet, it's endearing. But I all I can tell you, I've seen letters, and that box definitely said LUCY. So take it for whatever that is worth. Um, yeah, I was thrilled to be in that house, it was quite a privilege. Um, the Chatsworth house, the one that they called the ranch, which was actually about 5 acres, and, um, they had 1 cow, and they had a tiny little garden, and lots of cocker spaniels and cats. Oh, yes, they did have chickens. They did have chickens, but here and they did have a pig. Okay, so in that respect, maybe it was a little bit of a farm, um, but the story goes they could never bear to slaughter a single animal. The pig, Desi had gotten the pig specifically to fatten up so it could be roasted for their Christmas dinner in a few months, and Lucy was horrified. "No! No! No, you can't kill him. No, no!" And so they ended up making a pet out of the pig. They had a dairy cow. I've told this story that they called the Duchess of Devonshire, and they couldn't bear to slaughter her either. They fell in love with her, but more so, the cow had a mad crush on Desi. I'm repeating some stories I've told before, but this is all for context. There was a night they were in their bedroom, and they had a big picture window, and they hear crash. The cow had smashed through the window, walked into the bedroom, and went up to Desi and started licking his face. And Lucy said, "You gotta do something about your goddamn girlfriend, Desi." And Lucy and Desi both said in their autobiographies when it came time to sell the Chatsworth Ranch, when they were gonna move to Beverly Hills, this was during the height of I Love Lucy, and one of the main reasons they decided to leave their beloved ranch was for security reasons. They were worried about their 2 young children, and they were fearful of kidnapping because they were too isolated, and they felt living in Beverly Hills, they'd have much better security from the Beverly Hills police and so forth, and I think also they figured they were successful enough, they could now have a big Beverly Hills mansion, but they loved that ranch so much, and they could not bear to have anything happen to Duchess. So at tremendous expense, they paid for boarding at a farm or something with the guarantee that Duchess would be allowed to live all of her remaining days in happiness, literally put out to pasture. And then as far as the stories about the chickens, yes, the word that did inspire the story of the chickens in Connecticut. They had chickens, but keep in mind none of them were slaughtered. None. None of those chickens became dinners. The joke was those chickens were so elderly, so geriatric, they were hobbling around on crutches. Even the chickens lived to a very old age. But, I never got to go there. I always wish I had. I had a friend who went there once. It was when it was being sold, and he did the trick of pretending that he was a client interested in purchasing the house, so the real estate agent gave him a tour. Unfortunately, the house was bought, and it has long since been torn down, so it's not there for anybody to see anymore. So I was happy to get into Lucy's Ogden Drive home, and, I will admit I did a similar thing when Carol Lombard's Hollywood Boulevard home was up for sale in 2010. I got dressed up and pretended to be wealthier than I am, and I made an appointment with a real estate agent just so I could get a tour of the house. Big Lombard fan, as you know, and that was a big deal for me to be in there. But yeah, I'm sure I'm not the first person to have done a thing like that. In fact, that's very much a Lucy Ricardo thing to do. Yeah, I know. Boo, the ranch is gone. But the Ogden Drive house, if you were to see it from the outside, it looks almost exactly the same as it looked in the 1930s. In fact, there are some famous color home movies of Lucy and Desi and Grandpa Hunt and Dee Dee and Desi's mother in front of the house, and you can see for yourself how it looked. In fact, you can even see the doorway with the little window panes of glass that I'm talking about. You can probably find that on YouTube. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's anyone interested in history or Hollywood trivia wanting to join us. It may be just the two of us today. I have a feeling this is going to be a show where most of my audience is going to come later and watch the replay, but that's great. And I'm always grateful to all of you for when you do this. Um, it's genuinely my privilege to come here every week, do this show. Um, it gives me peace. It calms my nerves. I have fun doing this. And hey, Diane. Hey, another person. I'm glad you're here. Um, yeah, and in time, and I do mean in time. I just don't have it right now to do this. My life is just insanely busy, but I will produce new videos again, and I have about 700 on them right now. About 700 videos. They're all archived, and I've got lots more old Hollywood stories to tell. I can assure you, it's just getting the time to make those things and get them posted, and also to be consistent on a daily basis. Right now, my one consistency is doing this live stream every Monday, and I've tried to be a real stickler about this. So at least this gives me some content. I'm sure my what is it, the algorithms or whatever the word for it is. I've never have understood how that works entirely, but they may not be the greatest right now, but I'm not worried about it. I there was a period I was giving my heart and soul to this channel. I was sometimes investing as much as 8 to 10 hours a day, but then I was letting a lot of other things slide in my life. I didn't realize how much doing a YouTube channel can turn into a full-time job. And maybe my problem is I pushed myself too hard. I didn't find moderation and balance. I was maybe a little too driven. For example, in the month of March, when it was Oscar season, and because I live 15 minutes down the road from downtown Hollywood in my little part of Los Angeles. It's very easy. It was very easy for me to go there on Hollywood Boulevard, be in front of the Dolby Theater, and just do a lot of videos and pieces about the Oscars, Hollywood history, Hollywood Boulevard. But let's see, I think I posted 140 videos that month. I had friends taking me aside saying, "We're worried about your health, both physical and emotional. You're pushing yourself too hard. You're in a lot of anxiety. This doesn't seem healthy." And I finally had to agree. I needed to step back from it for a while. And so I think I'll come back and do it in a much more balanced way. Let me see. I'm looking at some other comments here. Yeah, I better take my time than rush through and have it be slapdash. I'll agree by that. How is parking by the Dolby? Um, it's probably just exactly what you think it would be. It's a effing nightmare to park in Hollywood. Um, or you can park. Well, no, wait. I think at this time, I'm not even sure you could park at the Hollywood and Highland, which they now call the Ovation. That's the new name for the mall where the Dolby Theater is located. And of course, the Dolby Theater is where they have the Oscars. And every year at Oscar time, they spend about 7 to 10 days. They completely shut off about 2 or 3 blocks of Hollywood Boulevard. Yes, the nightmare of traffic. It's just what you'd expect it to be. They close off Hollywood Boulevard and they have to put up chain link fences, and then they have to start putting in the red carpet and putting it on the sidewalk and putting the canopies overhead and setting up the lights. It's extremely complicated. And another reason it's so complicated is because of security concerns. They have to do enormous preparations. And I was, I had heard the stories that they actually had snipers. Is that the right word for this? People with rifles on the roof, good people, law enforcement people up on the roofs with rifles and things like that in preparation for anything that could go wrong. And I had that confirmed because I was on the rooftop of the Roosevelt Hotel this June. And I went up with a security guard who was very gracious to accompany me and let me up there and see it. And I asked him that, and he said, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, nobody is allowed up here during Oscar time except for law enforcement people, FBI and that type of thing." But, they have to do searches for any bombs, they have to weld manhole covers shut, mailboxes have to be removed. It's a very elaborate thing that goes on. But to get back to the story about parking, I did find a place to park, but I went there early in the day, like about 1 in the afternoon on a weekday. Even with that, I had to park about 10 blocks away, but I did get a place to park my car, and I walked over, but I kinda knew I was gonna have to do that, and I was grateful to even find that parking space. But Hollywood, just on, like, say, a Friday or Saturday night, because of all the nightclubs there and everything, it's not unusual to pay 30 or $40 to park your car, which just out of principle, I won't do. I won't do. I think what I would do if I were insane enough to go to Hollywood on a Saturday night, I'd probably just take an Uber or a Lyft. I'd rather pay it for that than have to deal with the hassle of a parking spot and then the bumper to bumper traffic. It's not my idea of fun. Do they have parking scans where they give your credit card info and then get charged lots of dollars, have to get back and have no idea about the prices? Um, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, they have that, but I mean, generally you do see what the parking rates are. They do have a sign posted. I think legally they have to do that, but it's kind of like I'm biting my tongue when I see something like, "Oh, first half hour, $5. Every 15 minutes after that, another $5, another $5." It's just, you feel like I feel like I'm being hijacked. Like, it's against my will, like I have no choice to pay those ridiculous prices, and I try my best to avoid it. But yeah, the security has to be tremendous. Because when you think about it, that I God forgive me for even saying this out loud, but let's face it, with all of those A-list celebrities, all gathered together in the same building, that would be a terrorist's dream. It would be televised all over the world. But I mean, forgive me for even putting that out there. I don't even like saying that out loud, but it is a fact. It's a reality that security has to be so tremendously tight. I've lived here for many years. I've told stories of how I've stood outside and watched Oscar parties after the event, and, like the old Spago's restaurant in West Hollywood. I used to stand across the street and watch the stars go in. And I've watched over the years how the security got tighter and tighter and tighter. Back in the 80s, nobody was checked. It was just free for all. You just gathered across the street and watched the stars, and they'd come over and shake hands with you and sign autographs. But I saw less and less of that as the years went on, until finally, when the big Oscar party used to be held at the old Morton's restaurant on Melrose, they had metal detectors set up, like they have at airports. They were making everybody, I mean everybody, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Helen Mirren, everybody had to pass through the metal detector, and they had to empty out their pockets and everything like that. So that's how tight the security eventually became, to where now you try to go something like that, there are big concrete barricades set up. You can't see a thing anymore. I think the last one I went to, there were smaller barricades, but I did get to see Donald Trump. he was one of the guests. I got to see him get out of the limo, and he did wave to all of us, and, of course, this was years before I knew, but it was just Donald Trump. What was that? "I hope you don't get blocked?" You didn't get blocked? I don't know what you mean more, what kind of blocking? Um, but it's risky, and that's not even counting on the expensive threads and jewels. Yeah, it is risky. It is risky. Yeah, that's right, and I and that includes, like, all the expensive jewels and the gowns and so forth. Um, yeah, in fact, I've heard of stories where, because a lot of those jewels the stars wear are being loaned out from, like, Tiffany's, Harry Winston's, Cartier, and sometimes it's millions of dollars worth of jewelry. I mean, literally millions of dollars, where one of the conditions is they have to be accompanied by a security guard. Usually, it's a security guard who's very discreet, out of camera range, not seen by the public, but they're very much there. That's part of the stipulation. Like if you see Nicole Kidman wearing a $3 million necklace, you bet your life. I hope you weren't too upset by 45. Well, I promised I wasn't going to get political, but draw your own conclusions to that one. I hope I wasn't blocked when I parked. No, no. Oh, no, no, no. I wasn't blocked. That much, thankfully, I wasn't. I didn't know when you said blocked, I didn't know if you meant, like, blocked here on the show or something. I don't know what you meant, so I see what you mean. Um, oh, yes, yes, that's true about Elizabeth Taylor's ring on Here's Lucy. There had to be a security guard present for that, and I think that was at Elizabeth's own insistence. Yeah, and it was understandable, and, I've even heard different versions of the story. I've never been able to verify it, that was actually a prop ring she was wearing on the show. They have this one close up, where Lucy has it on her finger and she's doing that, but you can clearly see it was an insert shot that was put in. I think when they were actually in front of the audience, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a prop ring because really no one was going to be able to see it up close anyway, if it was real or not. But uh, Luce Elizabeth was very fond of that diamond, very fond of all of her diamonds. There were several that Richard Burton bought her, and I think that particular diamond, Elizabeth later sold so that she could pay for a hospital to be built in Africa. That's a version that I read. But the 33 carat diamond ring, I think it was originally called the Krupp diamond, and after she passed away, it was changed to the Taylor diamond appropriately. So I know because I knew her assistant, he told me Elizabeth wore that ring every day of her life. And she was very particular about it. Like, do not touch my diamond and get fingerprints on it. She was constantly keeping it clean and sparkling. Yes, I know that story because that story was the week, Lucy Arnaz had, just become engaged, and Elizabeth was like, "Oh, show us your engagement ring," and, of course, Lucy Arnaz had the tiny, tiny little diamond, and Lucy said Elizabeth was so gracious and treated her little itty bitty diamond like it was her own 33 carat diamond. Elizabeth just loved all diamonds, and it was Elizabeth who gave the advice clean your diamonds with toothpaste. Yes, I prefer Taylor to Krupp also, much more so. The Taylor diamond, and it was auctioned after her death. I think it brought something like $8 million. I could be wrong on that. I'd have to look that up. It was something in that area, and I know that a lot of, Elizabeth's jewelry she did graciously leave pieces of jewelry to various friends. Debbie Reynolds was one of them. Debbie Reynolds wrote in her autobiography that Elizabeth willed a very beautiful, emerald suite to her, the earrings, the necklace, with a suite, that's what it's called, left that to her, and, there were other people, but most of the money, went to benefit Elizabeth's AIDS foundation, and that was a lovely thing to do, and Elizabeth herself said in a Barbara Walters interview, because she had written a coffee table book featuring all of her jewelry, and, Barbara Walters was interviewing Elizabeth, and they had a table in front of her with black velvet, and a lot of her beautiful diamonds, her bracelets, her rings, her earrings, everything spread out on the table, and under those lights, it was believe me, it was like a bonfire, it was sparkling, and Elizabeth said, "Barbara, I love being their guardian. I love being their guardian." And she said, "I love them because they come from the earth." They come from the earth, and that's right, we forget about that. They're beautiful things that come out of the ground, come out of deep out of the earth, but I loved it when she said, "I'm their guardian," and I immediately got the hit from what she said was meaning they're mine to look over in my lifetime, but once I'm gone, they go to others. We can't take it with us, much as we'd like to. I used to joke that about my mother because my mother loved all of her beautiful antique furniture and fixtures in our home. She spent her lifetime collecting all of these wonderful 19th century pieces. And I used to joke, if anybody's going to find a way to take it with them, it's going to be my mom. And when my mother died, I half expected there to be like a clap of lightning and all the furniture was going to disappear in the house. But that did not happen. Hence the china cabinet that's in my kitchen right now that I had shipped out here from to California all the way from Virginia at great expense. But it always makes me think of her. Um, yeah, but in fact, I think Bob Hope had a joke about Bing Crosby. Oh, Crosby's found a way to take his money with him. He has an asbestos suitcase. Uh, yeah, but yeah, diamond starters carbon, but get pressured by volcanoes to become such pristine gems and the hardest rock in the world. That's true. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it is a sweet story about my mother. Oh, my mother was a complicated woman, much like Lucy was complicated. There's I could go in a lot of directions talking about her, but there were things that she loved, to where it wasn't really materialism, like, and so there were a few pieces that I did keep for myself because they are such reminders of her and her energy, and I do my best to carry on the love for them. uh, on her behalf. I like to think wherever she is, she's smiling on this. So, anyway, I see here that I've been on here an hour and 20 some minutes. These shows get long, uh, but I enjoy what I'm doing. Before I sign out, is there any last thing you'd like me to talk about or address or a question, or shall I just call it a night for now? And thank you very much for joining me. It's so appreciated here on Chuck's Captivating Chat. And please, what's this? Could Miss Taylor and your mother have thought they of playing dress up and tea like children? I don't know. That's quite a thought. I never thought about that. Um, the closest thing I ever had to linking my mother with Elizabeth Taylor, that was something that it was one of those things that could have happened, but sadly did not. And I've told this story before also, but because I knew Elizabeth Taylor's assistant, he was going to set up a lunch for the two of us. And, this was when I was working in West Hollywood. And this was sadly turned out to be the last year of her life. And she used to go to nearby Cedar Sinai to her heart doctor. And sometimes she would go to her optometrist, who was just down the road from there, very close to where I worked. And there was a restaurant a block away that she used to love to go to, which I was amazed because I used to go there myself. I said that, oh, they even had a special table for her in the back where she could have privacy and be left alone. I said, I tell you what, next time we go to the eye doctor or something, I'll hit you up at work and see if you can take off for lunch and we'll get together. And I was thrilled about that. And it was going to happen, but keep in mind, it was her last year and her health was failing badly. And needless to say, we never got around to that lunch. But I've told the story. Um, oh, I don't know if I can get it off my finger. How's that for Lucy? Um, I wear my mother's diamond ring. I had a jeweler cut the shank off of it, and melt the platinum down and build it up and turn it into a man's ring. A lot of people don't know you can do sex changes on rings. So that's how I'm able to wear my mother's ring. Well, anyway, what I really wanted to do, I'd been given a whole checklist of appropriate things to say to Elizabeth and things not to say to her, such as whatever you do not call her Liz. She hates to be called Liz. And I was, of course, told, do not ask about the husbands, don't ask about her personal life, which I knew. Now, I was surprised. He said, now don't ask her about her movies. She hates that too. I was like, really? Well, what do I talk about? And he said, talk about life. Just talk about life. And he said, and he pointed at the ring and said, oh, Elizabeth will want to talk about your diamond ring. And I was like, this piddly little thing with these three little stones. He said, trust me, Chuck, anything to do with diamonds. She loves to talk about it. It's her favorite subject. She will be delighted. And what I wanted to do was what I just did now, take the ring off and say, Miss Taylor, or I think I was told, call her Dame Taylor. She was very big about protocol. Unless you were a very close friend, then you could call her Elizabeth. But no, I think he said call her Dame Taylor. But Dame Taylor, I'd be so sincerely moved. It would mean so much to me to know that my mother's ring, because my mother wore this almost every day of her life for more than 50 years. I'd say my mother's ring, if you put it on your finger, or at least hold it in your hands, I could always say, my mother's ring made it all the way to Elizabeth Taylor's finger. I would have done that, but I didn't get to do it. But my mother would have been heaven or wherever she is going, oh, my ring made it to Elizabeth Taylor. Uh, yeah, that you're right, Ward. She was just bugged to death about all of that. And I think that she was just tired of having to answer questions like that. And yes, she did earn that title from the Queen. She very much earned it. She deserved it. And she was very proud of it. She maintained her dual citizenship, America and, of course, the UK. She was proud of both. And yeah, that was an honor that truly counted. But, Elizabeth could also be the salt of the earth, from what the assistant told me. Very unpretentious, warm. There was one time she was hosting an event at her personal home. I think it was for people who worked for her AIDS charity or something. It was just regular people. It was a gathering. And she said to one of the people, oh, feel free, take all the pictures you want. Walk around my house. Take pictures of anything you want. I don't mind. And I thought, no, that was gracious. So that's who she was. I love Elizabeth Taylor. So I think that's probably a good thing to bow out on right now, as it's now almost an hour and a half. And I'm going to let you guys go. So I just thank you so much for joining me here, Chuck's Captivating Chat. And please like and subscribe. Watch my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, for all my archived videos and any little surprises I'll put on there from time to time. And I will be here next Monday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.